welcome to Clockwise Thoughts. I'm Scout, and of course, this is Black.
How y'all doing, everybody?
And today is one of the great days, Martin Luther King Day. Hopefully, this day is going to have extra meaning this year. Just a couple of days away, the first Black female or woman, period, of vice president gets sworn in.
Inauguration day, right around inauguration day in a couple hours, basically.
Yes, we're under 48. You got that going on, but today, because being out and about, got a serious question someone asked me, and it made me have a good couple of food for thoughts. And they honestly asked, did Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream actually come true? Is it the American people now on a playing field to say, hey, we've already had the first Black president, 2 terms. Now we have the first Black female vice president. Is it safe to say, has his dream actually starting to come true? Or is it still a big divide overall? And I'm gonna let you ponder on that question first, Black.
Actually, to be completely and totally honest with you, I had an unrelated, I want to say argument. I can't even call it a debate. I had an unrelated argument with a coworker today along the lines of kind of similarly along those lines. And You know what? Before I start, let me preface this. Look, it's a serious topic. It's a serious conversation. So unfortunately, there might be some words that go in the bad people category. You know what I'm saying? I'm just be honest with you. But we gonna try and keep this clean, but we're gonna keep this as honest as we can because it's a really serious subject, and you gonna get the raw emotion. But
there you go. That's all we expect.
I was having a conversation with a coworker today, and I literally stopped to think about it, and I was like, wait a minute. How old is our country? So I looked it up. It says the United States as of 2020 is 244 years old. Okay. All right. Roll with me on this one now. The civil rights, I don't know if you want to call it era or movement. You know what I mean? The big push for equality, whether it be voting, women's rights, the desegregation, things of that nature. This all came to a head in 1960, I believe 68. I'm not going to say when Dr. King was assassinated, April 4th in Memphis. I'm not going to say that's when the civil rights era ended. But it brought me to an interesting point that I brought up with my coworker. Mind you, I'm gonna just let y'all know this is my super staunch Republican. If you guys don't understand what staunch means, that means he does not do anything other than his party. But I went to him and I asked him, if the country is 244 years old, but the civil rights, like I said, I don't want to really call it the era, but that whole movement was, I don't know, 64, 65 years ago. I was like, realistically, more than half of the country's lifespan has been spent to a degree marginalizing minorities. Okay? From inception, from the forefathers who owned slaves. I mean, look, I'm gonna be real. My sister's good friend from middle school, she's actually a descendant of one of the slaves Thomas Jefferson impregnated. But it just begs the question: if it's only been 64 years out of the 244, and the country was literally founded on the concept and to a degree of marginalizing minorities, or just, let's be real, those people who are not white, then to answer your question, no, I don't think Dr. King's dream has actually fully come to fruition. And my coworker looked at me and he says, well, what can we do to change that? Now, I don't think he was asking me what can we do to change it, as in he genuinely wanted to know. I think it was more of the, okay, black people keep griping. What is it that you guys want exactly? Mind you, my coworker's Cuban, but I looked at him and I said, I think the only thing that could actually help is time, because realistically, we have not gone half of the country's existence, you know, in the grips of Jim Crow and in the grips of slavery, segregation. We haven't gone half of the country's lifespan without that to compare it to the first half of the country's lifespan with that. So,
True.
To be honest, the dream is progressing, but I don't believe the dream has actually come to fruition yet. But that also might just be because of time. Now, in your opening, you mentioned we had our first black president 2 terms. Now, this was, I say that hit me hard because what my coworker mentioned was, he's like, you know, out of all of the time, all of the people, he's like, if even one Cuban came to America and made it, then that's what counts. And I'm like, that's true. But at the same token, if you only have one success for 9,999 failures, is that one success the rule or the outlier? If you're telling me 1 out of every 10,000 is going to succeed, granted, I understand we are a people of 320 million in this country. Now, I don't know if that's documented and undocumented, but I believe that's what the census told me. But again, it begs the question, if 1 out of 10,000, think about that. If you put yourself in, I don't know, what is that, like maybe a college arena, maybe a little bit bigger than that. But if 1 out of, or even if it's a baseball stadium, okay, again, I'm not sure the exact numbers of the seatings, but you telling me one, let's use a football stadium. Let's use a football stadium. Let's be honest about this. You telling me one person out of that entire stadium can actually succeed? Are we really moving towards equality? Again, I understand it's only been 60 or so years since this really started going. But I asked the question because he made that statement to me. I personally thought it was kind of asinine, and I'm trying to reflect on it. But again, if in a football stadium, a filled stadium to capacity, one out of all of those people there has an actual legitimate chance to succeed, we're making progress. But are we really making progress?
Well, but I'm going to say this. Change always starts with one person. I'm going to give this notion, and I'm going to say this. The United States as a whole changed when we elected President Obama for 2 terms. Then it went back to a way of, we're going to divide because who was in that seat. The people noticed that because I'm going to just throw this out there. Look at the last 4 years. Okay. Better yet, let's look at the last 12 in total. Last 12 years in total. We went from handling the 2 biggest world wars that's constantly still going because we still send troops to Iraq and Afghanistan, but we handled that dilemma, okay? Then we went into a stage of where everyone's saying, oh, well, this is the biggest debt of ever trying to handle this and creep this, okay? Then look at the back end of those 12. We went so far back as a step of, we went further back to the 1920s, to be honest. Uh, in the last 12 years, you can't say, or just basically in the last 4, the way how things has been, anyone would have ever thought this would have happened the way it did. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about the pandemic. I'm talking about we went back to police not being accountable. Like this was the Rodney King trial. Okay, we went back there. We went back to people trying to dig up dirt and honestly not paying attention to the facts of a 911 phone call of a woman that they was not in there to get shot and killed. To where you had peaceful protesting people getting sprayed by mace and wasn't allowed to go so far. To just here recently, people being able, storming the Capitol, going into buildings that you know it's off limits, going through people's desks, propping your feet up, and the thing about it, so far, only 12 of them individuals, 12, a 1 and a 2, 12. But it was more than just a dozen that went in there. It's not adding up. I'm not going to say Dr. King's dream has totally failed. I'm not going to say that. No. I can't. No. I honestly can't. I can't because who I am as a person and how my family is.
And we wouldn't be sitting my family conversation if that were the case.
Right. Because one, my family is totally, oh Lord, we totally mix. It doesn't matter because first and foremost, we never see color. Never have. Wasn't raised that way. Second is this. Regardless the way how you were taught or what you've seen, it boils down to the individual person. If you're willing to change your heart to not see or not to follow suit of what you've seen or was what was taught or how you was raised, that's the only thing a part of Dr. King's speech that people forget. It's on the individual. It's truthfully on the individual. Because I'm going to say this. I know where some of my family come from. And I know a lot of times on both sides, it's hard to accept a different race or to try to understand. Mm-hmm. But on the same note, if a child comes out of that, all that is cut aside. Or even if a child don't come part of it, if you really love your child or your person and that person loves that person, all that should go out the window. It shouldn't be that you're still looking down a narrow lane. Like how they have some of these horses that's in these races. Take your blinders off. There you go. Take the blinders off. Because I promise you, if it was more people, I'm not going to just say in the United States, if it was more people in the world would stop trying to be like this all the time and go and see that you can see over here too, as still as you still looking straight, but you can see over here, take your blinders off. Because honestly, we can say this all the given time. Black lives matter. Yes, they do. All lives matter. Hands down. But we celebrate this day over a man that was fighting for it, that spent the ultimate praise. He lost his life. just like the man did abolish slavery. It wasn't even two, 3, maybe 6 the most months after that, assassinated.
Caught one right in the back of the head in the theater.
Yes. And then when President Kennedy was trying to uphold the end of the bargain, caught one in the neck and then a fatal blow. One in the neck, one through the hand, and then a fatal blow to his head.
But see, I think one of the things, and I do honestly think that maybe Dr. King's actual, I want to say perception, not his vision, but I think his perception might have changed had he not been killed, excuse me, because racism is like this is one of the sticking points. And again, this may just be semantics, but when you start playing with the language a little bit and you start really trying to find the exact word, because we have so many in our language, when you try to find the exact words for what's going on, what you're feeling, I think Dr. King, had he lived, I think maybe his perception would have changed to, I don't know if this is more of a generalized look at it, but racism existed in his lifetime. Okay,
Yes.
That's what the civil rights era was. It was to get over racism, but women's rights, women's voting rights, things of that nature that were also restricted. That's not racism. That's just discrimination. And I think what has endured is maybe not so much racism, but the actual core of discrimination. I mean, like you touched on earlier, in the climate of our country in the last, I don't know, calendar year and a half, pandemic included, we've seen instances of, police brutality, and even with the protesting for BLM, with the protesting at the Capitol building.
Right.
What I see in those,
it seemed like it was a different set of rules. Basically.
And that's what I'm saying. I don't necessarily know if I would call that racism, because what we were dealing with in this country wasn't a divide between neighbor of opposing or different skin color. We were looking at a divide within families drawn on, in a sense, political lines. You were literally being discriminated on, not because of your race, the color of your skin, not even the content of your character, literally by the values that you have or the views that you have. You were being discriminated on because of that. So I don't think Dr. King, I don't know if he really experienced that in his lifetime, because in his lifetime, it was more seen as just, your color doesn't match mine, we're on opposite ends. But I personally feel in today's world, you know what I mean, the 60 or so years, because he would have been 92, I believe, if he were still alive today. I believe racism has taken a back seat. So almost in a sense, I know it still exists, but almost to a degree, I feel as though that fight that he fought, I believe he conquered as best he could. But as the times have progressed, the core evil, the core of just pure discrimination based on whatever difference you have, whether it be physical, psychological, ideological, that core discrimination has never actually really dissipated. I don't know if it ever actually can dissipate. So I think that's why to a degree, maybe a younger person, maybe an older senile person would look at it and say, I don't know if he actually has succeeded. Has his dream come true? But I believe his dream was for equality. Now, again, like I said, he was fighting inequality based off of race. And that was true for the time that he lived in. Jim Crow just got pretty much cut out. But at the same token, in today, in 2020, 2021, as we stand here today, you're still seeing discrimination, but it doesn't have as much to do with your melanin count as it does your ideology or your political views. And I think even Dr. King would have seen, I think, as his life progressed, that yes, the hatred, the bigotry is still there. It's not directed at you because of so much the color of your skin, but it's literally directed at you because your views don't align with the quote unquote norm or the status quo. You know what I mean? Again, I don't think that his dream failed. I just think his perception might have changed had he lived to realize that discrimination is still running rampant. It's still running rampant. Just it's not as much based on race as it is other factors now.
Well, I agree and I disagree. And I'm going to tell you why on both. I agree with you because a lot of it can boil down to somewhat thin line of what you believe in. But the reason why I say I don't disagree on some of this, it's always been a race issue. And I'm sorry to say this because normally I know we don't bring this part into our show or not, but you can even go back far enough into biblical days. The Egyptians didn't like the Hebrews.
Mm-hmm.
For some odd reason, that mindset carried on to what has went on here inside this country. And I'm sorry to say, it's a shame. It's past the shame because if you really look at it, look how long suffering, messed up things, horrible and countless things they went through. Then you flip it to pretty much what's been going on the last 200, 300 years now. Here. It's sad to say that it's a mirror thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you honestly break it down, it is. Because, honestly, growing up, you used to hear, the United States is just never going to ever be ready for a black president. It's not going to happen. Regardless if y'all are professors and stuff like that, it's never going to happen. Got told this. Had a classmate of mine. Said that's what he wanted to do. No, you need to change that.
Yeah. And I understand. I can understand that that's racism.
Right. But I'm saying, and you get told this in school.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at it, that part, it's really a select few. Like I keep saying, it's done by choice. One thing that I learned from a good friend of mine over this past weekend, and he said it with a kind heart and a conscious mind. And he said it like this. He said, it doesn't matter what color your skin is. It doesn't matter where you come from. You know what would matter? What did you honestly do in your time here on earth to make it better, to leave it better than what it was when you got here? Did you help your fellow man to your left and your right to the best of your ability? And did you always seek the knowledge to be better than what you were?
Now, see, that's
Simple.
deep. Now, see, that's deep. But at the same token, that's a hard ask because some people are not able to be completely 100% objective with themselves.
True. That's why I keep saying it's an individual thing. Yes.
People do
Yes, it
perpetuate the
is.
divide.
Right. But it's an individual thing. It is. It may be a hard pill to swallow because we all done seen it. Heck, you done seen it. They done made movies about it and everything else. A couple get together and it's a mixed race and a kid, and then you don't like the father or the mother because this race, but when your child is getting ready to leave or they cut off you from seeing your grandchild, oh, then you want to make changes or whatever else. It shouldn't take that.
No, but
And
unfortunately, you need sometimes you
it
need
does.
that hot iron. Sometimes, sadly,
Right.
sometimes you need that hot iron.
Yeah, you sadly do, but today's age and what is going on now in 2021, I constantly hope and pray that my kids or my friends' kids or just the youth, period, keep wanting to be better. Don't see
Oh yeah,
this.
oh yeah.
Don't see this. Go by the character of the person that's standing in front of you.
Well, I'm gonna tell you this right now. Your kids' grandkids might be the ones to actually see that finally come to the surface in all its glory. But at the same time, I think maybe, and this is where stuff gets kind of scary, a drastic overhaul of the system. But the problem with that is, forget how difficult it is. It's the fact that the system in place has kind of been what has kept things in their place. And to destroy that and rebuild would mean to literally have everything grind to a halt. And I don't know if people are actually ready for that extreme. You know what I mean? To bring it back
Right.
again, to bring it back to Martin Luther King Day. We're talking about a leader who wanted the Negro boys and girls to hold hands with the white boys and girls and sing songs in unison. And today that can happen, that does happen, but at the same time, and I know this is going to sound bad. I'm not trying to bag on it, but I have to be honest about it. In our era today, especially with social media, things of that nature, the amount of information that's coming in, politics plays a very large role in that. And I think politics plays a role in perpetuating, like I said, the divide. It's very, very interesting because I think what keeps racism alive, and I don't mean for the small rural backwoods areas where it's almost like civilization hasn't touched them yet. I mean in mainstream and metropolitan areas. I think what perpetuates racism to a degree is because based off your skin tone, you are, in a sense, your political affiliation is already determined. Long and short of it, to put it bluntly, if you black, you a Democrat. If you white, you a Republican. As bad as it sounds, for the most part, that's where the starting point takes off from. So at that point in time, you already have two races of people diametrically opposed to each other based on in a sense their ideology, but their ideology is in a sense associated with their skin tone. So it does seem as though it's racism, but realistically it's a difference in opinion and views. But because people are looked at as a monolith, like, a lot of people assume if you're black, you think this way. Hell, Joe Biden said if you don't vote for him, you ain't black. So it's like that mentality. My coworker, and he and I argue repeatedly. We go back and forth about this, but we actually enjoy the challenge because it's like we're trying to bridge the gap that we have. But in his thing, he has so much venom, piss, and vinegar because as a Republican, he says people deem him as a Nazi and the KKK as a Republican, which is really retarded because the KKK are Democrats, but we ain't even gonna get into that. But you notice how your political view is in a sense tied to your race. It shouldn't be that way, but it's what allows racism to a degree to keep dragging itself into every new era. You know what I mean? Your politics are how many times have you heard this? How many times have you heard this? A black person can get up in front of you and start trying to explain some real serious shit, some real geopolitical shit. First thing you gonna look, and he sound white. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're associating a race with his viewpoint, with his ideology. Forget the fact that he's black, but when he starts talking about things that are on the table with people in those circles, oh, you must be white, you must be somebody else. You know what I mean? Or have you heard the white guy who talk like he just walked out the hood? Because at the end of the day, that's where he grew up. That's literally where he grew up. But then people look at him, oh, you trying to be black. You see what I'm saying? Based on his ideology, based on his views. Granted, it's what he associates with because that's what's in the area for him to do so. But now we have, in a sense, a racial divide, not based on color of skin, but actually by ideology and to a degree content of character. Again, like I said all this to say this, and I'm not trying to shit on Dr. King's dream. It's just I believe to a degree racism has either quote unquote evolved or taken a new form.
I say it has evolved. Everything is going to evolve. The way is you touched on earlier, the way how the world is with social media and everything else, it's going to evolve. But on the same note, it's still evolving, then unevolving, leaving totally. It's an individual in here.
Yeah.
You make a choice. Every last one of us makes individual choices. It's a choice. And for this to change, it's going to take people making choices that they want to change, to break a cycle. It may be a generational cycle or whatever it may be, but to break it, to actually see change.
Mm.
Politicians been speaking about what we talk about in barbershops, laundromats, hair salons, in your house, to make that change. It's an individual effort for you, yourself, to actually care about the person to your left and right, no matter what skin color, race, or creed. I hope and pray this show here, we have enlightened people, regardless if it's been this special about Martin Luther King. I hope and pray the people that sat back and watched and supported us since day one, I hope we give you something every time we reset the clocks, that you learn something and that it's actually going to help you with that change. If it's on sports that we cover, spotlights on certain people, or shows like this one that actually hit home to everyone, not only like how I said in the United States, but around the world. This actually hits home. But in closing, I will say this. When the clocks reach strike, me and Black is going to be here.
Oh,
But
yeah. Oh, yeah.
we're going to leave you in closing with Dr. Martin Luther King. We'll see y'all again when the clocks reset. Peace.
Thank you.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. This nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. Not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill